Hello everybody, my name is Craig Bennett, and today I'm going to get into a video on calipers. Now, as far as things goes, this is well out of normal for this channel, but the reason why I'm doing this video is I did a poll asking if people are interested into 3D print content. And one of the things that is used when making 3D models for 3D prints is this, especially when you're trying to make tools or an object that you're going to be using. You're probably going to need something like this. Now I'm going to be using the CD tray, the bottom half of a CD tray, as an example, but how this basically works in a nutshell is the opening right here, we can measure the outside diameter of whatever, so in this case being that, and then if we want to measure the inside diameter, say for example the hole, the two pokey things, there we go. And then if we want to measure the depth, the thing at the bottom that comes out, we can set it on top and then do that, and we can see how deep that is and whatever. Now, as far as things goes, that's pretty much about it. But the big thing that you need to know is if you don't know how to actually use this, and if you don't know what you're to look for when buying these, you can get really messed over very quickly, especially when you get in something where you need something down in the 0.5 millimeters or even less than that, in this case being 3D prints. So as an example, I measured this earlier just to figure out the thickness of the plastic, and looking at it, you wouldn't know this, but the plastic is about 2 or 3 millimeters thick, so in this area. So basically all I did is measure the inside diameter, and it says 11.3, so the outside is a 14.6, so subtract that and you get your thickness of your plastic ball. So whenever, like say for example, if I was making a 3D print of this, like I lose these all the time or whatever, just for hypothetical sake, well, I now know how thick to make this to make it accurate replica of it. Same thing goes with anything else. Like say for example, I'm be working on this in a bit, doing a 3D draw up. Probably not going to do it on screen, but it's something like this where it's an actual tool. What the thing is I can just print them off and have accurate replicas of that, and that way I can have no worry if something's going to break, if it goes under load or whatever it may be. So how do you know if you're buying a good one of these or a bad? Well, this is something that I was taught during my first degree, and it got heavily into metalworking and also stuff like this, aerospace. But the big thing to note is you need to go for a digital version of this if all possible. See, the problem is unless you're working in something that doesn't need to be super accurate, so 1 inch, 2 inches, 1/2 inch, whatever, that doesn't really need to be super accurate. But you take a look at something like this in millimeters or even less than that, well, it needs to be very accurate. And there's something called parallax, and what parallax is basically when you are looking at a line, the number that it shows, it will be different from you to the next person, and it will even be different depending on when you're looking at it and all the other. So say for example, if you're looking at something that says 2, just hypothetical sake, well, the thing is, someone else comes over, they look at it, and they might see, oh, 2.10 or something like that. And then you look at it and say 2.5. and you saw 2 earlier, so how it go for 2.5? Well, what it is the line is slightly off, and depending on the angle of how you're looking at it, it's the shadow, the lighting, all the other that comes with it, it can mess with your vision on that. Whereas, and that's very important, because some of these, there is dial, and then you have, if you can still use the visual to see, but basically that even if you're looking at the hard visual, it can be off by a little bit. Now, obviously, if you're going for straight millimeters, then, like, say for example, right here, I can say, let's try to get very close, where it's like 1.18. Well, the thing is all I see is one millimeter. If you're looking at something that's big of a scale, where you're seeing 1 millimeter or something like that, or 1 inch or something like that, then you really don't have to worry about that as much. But when you get in these scales, you definitely need to worry about that. So what happens with digital is when it says 1, well, there's no question about it. Or if it says 1 point something, then there's no question about it. There is no question no matter who looks at it, because that number is always going to be the same. So that's why you're going to need to have a digital version. But the big thing you need to note is you also need to have a hardened stainless steel, or at least that's the best option. Now there's other type of metals out there, but if you're not rich, you're pretty much going to be stuck with hardened stainless steel. There are other options like plastic, wood, and all the other. I'll say stay away from those. The display on this is plastic, but the rest of the body is hardened stainless steel. And the reason for that, for me choosing that over aluminum or wood or plastic, is like rulers, if you're using it over time, the end will smash. So for example, like with this, if I'm using this over time, the little depth piece, this will compress a little bit, and what would end up happening is my number will be off, and that will make my whole thing off, depending on how bad it is. So with that, with hardened stainless steel, it decreases the likelihood of that as much as possible. In fact, with hardened stainless steel over aluminum and all this other stuff, you can easily hand this down to multiple generations, and as long as it's being taken care of, be put in proper environment, not used as a frisbee or whatever. What the fact of the matter is this will last multiple generations. The display won't, but the overall body will. And again, you can look at it like I can say, oh, this is 5 millimeters or whatever. I won't be able to get down to the point whatever, but at least that little bit I'll easily be able to see and go with that. So note that. Notes when you're dealing with that. Now, as far as that goes, you also need to note the abilities of it. So one of the biggest things, if I can show it here, the part that opens up and reads the outside diameter, if that has any gap in it, and if the either digital or if the digital, the dial, the whatever, if it says 0 at that point, then basically what happens is if that gap is, let's say, 1/4 millimeter or whatever, then that means your whole measurement is going to be off by whatever amount. Now note that if this only goes down to 0.01 of a millimeter, but if I need to go way down the line, the thing is I have to use special tools to figure out if this is correct before each use. Because I'm not going that in depth, I'm not worried about that. So, it just a visual, is there a gap there? That's all I'm really concerned about. And that's something that you need to note, because again, if it's like 1/4 or whatever of a millimeter, that means the rest of it's off. And you might say, okay, I can compensate for that, but once that increases or decreases over time. So you're going to have to measure it each and every time, which means you're going to have another measurement tool. And just to figure out it's 1/4 millimeter or whatever off, you're going to have another measuring tool altogether. That is probably in there, one of these. So as far as that goes, that's something to note. Now, as far as the big thing that I like about this is try to get one that zeroes out, because yeah, if you're moving up and down because it's digital, it should be able to keep up. But if you're going super fast, let's say for example you just get stupid and you just slam it shut or whatever, well, the thing is it will not be 100% accurate when it gets back to that closing state. So you can just press 0 and zero it out. If you got to do that each and every time, there's something wrong with the caliper. But if you're playing stupid games and you're closing really fast, that can save you right there. So you have a way to zero it out. Now, as far as that goes, you need to know the tolerance. In fact, that's probably what's going to have a little bit of play into that. So the tolerance of the thing is very, very important. What is tolerance? Let's use big numbers as an example. Let's say 1 inch tolerance, or you might see plus and then a slash minus, say for example 1 inch. Well, let's say for example you're reading something at 5 inches. Well, that means that the real number can be anywhere in between 6 inches to 4 inches. It's anywhere in between, but it's pretty much going to be in there. Whereas this, it's I forgot what a tolerance is off the top of my head, but with this, and I'll have a link down below to where you can get this, the tolerance is well below a millimeter. So, and because I'm dealing with 3D print and nothing too advanced than that, like as long as it's a little bit down there, then basically I'm good to go. If the tolerance is too wide, you might want to note that. You might want to try to find something else. But if it's very small, and if it's in lower numbers, then it should be fine. You just note what you need, because if you need something that reads a 1/10 of an inch and the tolerance goes well within that, what the fact of the matter is you can run some problems. Whereas if you're just worried to say about a millimeter and the thing is 1/10 of a millimeter, well, I'm not concerned about a 1/10 of a millimeter. I'm just concerned about a millimeter. So we're good to go on that. So that's also something that you need to note when you're buying these things. Now, again, big thing to note, this is $35. There's some up into $600. There's some in the $5 range. So should you get something $600? Not necessarily. Get something that you will need over a long period of time. One of the problems that you'll find with calibers, especially digital calibers, is if you do not use them, anything like this with a digital screen, if you do not use it for a extended period of time, we're talking about several years, the screen might not even work anymore, whether you replace a battery or not. So being able to use something, I wouldn't say often, but once every half year or something like that, then you should be fine. Even once every year, you should be fine. But if you only need it once for 5 years or 10 years, well, your screen might go out, like it or not. And I've personally seen it even with items like this, where the screen is gone. In fact, I need to throw it away because of that. So that's a huge thing to note when it comes to things like these. Now, the screens that they use, depending on the manufacturer, they might last a little bit longer, some might last a little bit less. But if you use it often enough, it should be fine, as long as you don't get water in it and all the other. Now, with all that in mind, make sure that you, again, store it in proper conditions. But I would advise you buy one with a case like this, and that way you don't have to worry about it runs problems. In fact, what I'll even do is I would even have a bag for it inside the case to keep humidity away from it, because that can cause problems with the electronics, let alone other things. So, and because if liquids gets into it and it gets all into the stuff, then basically that can push off your measurements. You might not know, oh, there's gunk in the tool, and that can throw off your measurement by a little. So having some little bag like this that can go into, it can save you even if the liquid somehow gets into it. Now obviously, if it's flooded or whatever, there's not much you can do there. Just try to do your best at cleaning it out. But if you sealed it off right, then theoretically that shouldn't even be a problem. But I wouldn't stand with that. If it's something like, oh, oil spilled on it, whatever, you won't have to worry about that as much if it's in a bag, even if it's in a case already. So after all that being said, please check out my next video, and I'm going to show you how to use Fusion 360 to simply make this, and also how to modify that to give you a little bit extra features. But anyways, I'll see you next video. Hope you have a great day.